Welcome. We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we decided to go back to the very beginning, before the actual beginning, as detailed in the book of Genesis in the beginning. And we came across this book, The Evidence of God in an Expanding Universe, by 40 American scientists who declared their affirmative views on religion, published in connection with the International Geophysical Year, edited by John Monsma. We had no clue who he was, so we decided to go online and check him out. We found information on him. He's long passed. Okay, he was a Dutch-American Protestant Presbyterian minister turned writer, editor and journalist on religious issues, best known as the author of the book that we just looked at. We're looking at The Evidence of God in an Expanding Universe. He was also a radio commentator and served as pastor at the Presbyterian Church. He worked as a priest for a period of time, and then he turned his attention to studying political and social issues and paid special attention to studying the relationship between religion and science throughout history. And nothing really much happened with him. It's just that in 1919 he embroiled the congregation in his dream of launching a Kuiperien, probably based on this person here, with the help of, who was the Prime Minister of the Netherlands between 1901 and 1905, an influential neo-Calvinist theologian and a journalist. He established the Reformed churches in the Netherlands. So he decided to create this daily newspaper in Chicago, USA. The body, the concurrence of Classical Illinois, granted him an indefinite leave of absence, but when the enterprise failed in 1921, the consistory revoked the leave. Monsma thereupon resigned from the ministry, which action went directly against the church order. The next year he sought to withdraw his hasty resignation letter, but the consistory would not hear of it, having received many sharp letters from their former cleric. Here's his works and death notes reference. Okay, that's a little bit of information we had on him. So he looked even further, and it was basically the same. And it has here, he earned a PhD at Princeton University. He was the editor of the New Reformation, a magazine for ministers and other church workers that ministers monthly from 1924 to 1925. And he died, but was survived by his wife Catherine and their 3 children. So we went further and looked for some more information on him. Basically the same information. Here's his works, notes and references. So back to this book. Here's the contents, editor's introduction, The Origin of the World by Chance or Design, Frank Allen, biophysicist, a conclusive test, Robert Morris Page, physicist, the lesson of the rosebush, etc., the inescapable conclusion, the answer to the unanswered questions. Let's look at facts without bent or bias, applying the scientific method, and so forth. Physical evidences of God, identifying Einstein's creative force, scientific revelations point to a God, and so forth. Chemical laws in God, and so forth. Man himself as evidence. The absoluteness of the certainty of God's existence, and epilogue by Andrew Conway Ivy, physiologist. And here's the editor's introduction, and he goes into a brief history. One here where only a month or 2 before this book went to press, a Texas biology professor told the American Association for the Advancement of Science, meeting in Indianapolis, that man is not really an animal, but a plant. Man, he pontificated, is the result of development in the internal structure of living plant cells, and yellow algae, microscopic water plants, and red and brown seaweed are part of his ancestry. How to account for this evolutionary process? The process is unknown, admitted the professor. He seemed never to have heard of God or creation. And he goes on about some younger student, a militant and fanatical, with fanatical views on atheism. He was refused entry into that university, or that course. And more information here. Is there a God? Months before the Harvard young men inserted this question in their report, this editor had sent it to a large number of American men of science, inviting them to answer it candidly and to grant him permission to have their answers published in a book. 40 of the answers are herewith presented to the reading public within this book. They naturally vary greatly in approach, thought and style, and each writer is responsible for his own production. The editor was merely the editor. But he states, let him say this, or allow him to say this. All the chapters, all 40 of them, are one in spirit, one in goal, one in fundamental convictions. The genuine enthusiasm was of our scientist writers for the idea of this book was most heartening. So he felt deeply grateful to all those who collaborated in this project. As to the need of this book, he also stated that the snapshots presented can only be greatly multiplied, both in our own country and abroad. It's the US. One can hardly blame the vast number of parents these days who hesitate to send their children to many of the high schools and colleges, fearing that they will turn religious skeptics. Parents are in error, of course, when they blame science and scientific instruction as such for these dangers. The contents of this book should help them see the light in this respect or that respect. And there's more information here. And it mentions the Russian launching of Sputnik. It is generally known that a considerable part of today's world is being dominated by leaders whose philosophy is that of atheistic materialism. One of the practical results of that philosophy and of the motivations and inner drives it creates is extensive technical achievements. Another is ways and means that are only too frequently abysmal in horror. When God is shelved, divine law, conscience, ethical principles, and practical morality will also be shelved, and a barbarism which at the same time is more refined and more brutal than that of the most benighted savages is bound to rear its Apollyon-like head. These writers in this book have each of them a sharp, sturdy arrow, and the whole quiverful of them is directed at that philosophy. The basic postulate of this book, its point of departure, is that science can establish by the observed facts of nature and intellectual argumentation that a superhuman power exists. It cannot identify that power or describe it except in very general terms. For identification and more detailed description, special revelation, i.e. the Bible, is needed. But by proceeding from the basic postulate, this editor felt that the scientists have struck effectively at the heart of atheism. They are scientists within this book, the 40 scientists. Atheism in Christianized lands is a throwback to paganism. It has been mistakenly argued that monotheism, belief in one God, has slowly and erratically developed from the lowest gradations of paganism. The opposite is the truth. Original monotheism has degenerated into the various forms of paganism. Originally, man had a natural sense of the one eternal God, his own creator, and the creator of the entire universe. Then this natural sense became adulterated, corrupted. Historically, this corruption has expressed itself in one, animism, fetishism, nature worship, idolatry, worship of manufactured idols, worship of man, some powerful individual, deification of the state, the dead end result, atheism. Many of our modern physico-philosophers have been very great thinkers, but their philosophy was essentially pagan. The same is true of the better-known modern biologists, such as Lamarck, Wallace, and Darwin. It may not be widely known, but the great and idolized Darwin himself seems to have grown somewhat skeptical about his thought structure toward the end of his life, and stated outright that if even the slightest fault was ever detected in his theory of mechanistic materialistic evolution, the whole structure would and should collapse. We've read something like that in one of the Darwin books. Such faults actually were detected, but the collapse did not happen. Instead, the neo-Darwinists arose. Some of the greatest of modern pagan thinkers, devoted followers of Darwin and associates, were honest enough to backtrack. Reinke of Germany, in his Die Welt als That, confessed that there is an eternal intelligence and an eternal power. Romance of England, shortly before his death, admitted that his whole scientific and philosophic setup had been basically wrong, and that the universe cannot possibly be explained without a God. There were other repentants besides these. A case by itself was that of Michael Faraday, world-renowned English chemist and physicist, who had been theorizing and speculating and building thought structures all his life. One day in 1867 he lay on his deathbed, and a friend and colleague asked the great scientist, "Faraday, what are your speculations now?" "Speculations?" repeated the dying man. "Speculations? I have none. Thank God, I am not resting my dying head upon speculations. I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day." And more information here. Many of our scientists, as this book will reveal, have become very humble in the process. Others have been humble from the outset. As they learn ever more, their heads are bowing down ever more in adoration. Probably to God. Some of them, perhaps many of them, have a strange sort of joy in their hearts, a joy unspeakable and full of glory. For over the fields of facts, and through the mist and murk and ever deepening gloom of problems, they have seen intermittently but assuredly, like an extragalactic visitant, the effulgence of the light. John Monsma. They've realized God. The Origin of the World, by Chance of Design, by Frank Allen, by a physicist, and here's his qualifications here. Recipient of Tony Gold Medal, Royal Society of Canada. It has often been made to appear that the material universe has not needed a creator. It is undeniable, however, that the universe exists. 4 solutions of its origin may be proposed. First, that it is an illusion, contrary to the preceding statement. Second, that it spontaneously arose out of nothing. Third, that it had no origin but has existed eternally. Fourth, that it was created. The first proposed solution asserts that there is no problem to solve except the metaphysical one of human consciousness, which has occasionally itself been considered an illusion. The hypothesis of illusion has been lately revived, probably in that era. It's been lately revived in Physical Science by Sir James Jeans, The Mysterious Universe, page 169, who stated that from the concepts of modern physics, the universe cannot admit of material representation, and the reason he thinks is that it has become a mere mental concept. Accordingly, one may say that illusory trains, apparently filled with imaginary passengers, cross unreal rivers on immaterial bridges form of mental concepts. The second concept, that the world of matter and energy arose of itself out of nothing, is likewise too absurd a supposition for any consideration. I'll repeat that. The second concept, that the world of matter and energy arose of itself out of nothing, is likewise too absurd a supposition for any consideration. The third concept, that the universe existed eternally, has one element in common with the concept of creation, either inanimate matter with its incorporated energy, or a personal creator, is eternal. No greater intellectual difficulty exists in the one concept than in the other, but the laws of thermodynamics, heat, indicate that the universe is running down to a condition when all bodies will be at the same extremely low temperature and no energy will be available. Life would then be impossible. In infinite time, the state of entropy would already have happened. The hot sun and stars, the earth with its wealth of life, are complete evidence that the origin of the universe has occurred in time, at a fixed point of time, and therefore the universe must have been created. A great first cause, an eternal, all-knowing and all-powerful creator must exist, and the universe is his handiwork. The adjustments of the earth for life are far too numerous to be accounted for by chance. First, the earth is a sphere, freely poised in space. He hangeth the earth upon nothing. Job 26:7, in daily rotation on its polar axis, giving the alternation of day and night, and in yearly revolution around the sun. These motions give stability to its orientation in space, and coupled with the inclination 23 degrees of the polar axis to the plane of its revolution, the ecliptic affords regularity to the season, thus doubling the habitable area of the earth and providing a greater diversity of plant life than a stationary globe could sustain. Secondly, the atmosphere of life supporting gases is sufficiently high, about 500 miles, and dense to blanket the earth against the deadly impact of 20 million meteors that daily enter it at speeds of about 30 miles per second. Among many other functions, the atmosphere also maintains a temperature within safe limits for life and carries the vital supply of fresh water vapour far inland from the oceans to irrigate the earth, without which it would become a lifeless desert. Thus the oceans with the atmosphere are the balance wheel of nature. 4 remarkable properties of water: its power of absorbing vast quantities of oxygen at low temperatures, its maximum density at 4 degrees Celsius above freezing, whereby lakes and rivers remain liquid, the lesser density of ice than water, so that it remains on the surface, and the power of releasing great quantities of heat as it freezes, preserve life in oceans, lakes and dry rivers throughout the long winters. The dry land is a stable platform for much terrestrial life. The soil provides the minerals which plant life assimilates and transforms into needful foods for animals. The presence of metals near the surface renders the arts of civilization possible. Surely Isaiah is right, 45:18 RSV, Revised Standard Version, in saying of God, he did not make it a chaos, he formed it to be inhabited. And he goes into more detail about why life exists, etc., proteins and so forth, by different calculations. He states here, proteins as chemicals are without life. It is only when the mysterious life comes into them that they live. Only infinite mind, that is God, could have foreseen that such a molecule could be the abode of life, could have constructed it and made it live.